Tass and Baltimore here to take on the Xavier Musketeers. Here to talk all things Terps. Does a lot of work in the college basketball space at Blue Ribbon as well as with the Terrapin Times. He's one of our defending champs, and he and I broke a little bread there down at the Verizon Center on Friday night before the beginning of the end of the Big Ten tournament for the Terps, and now they're trying to pick up the pieces. Mike Ashley joining us here. Mike, I would say that one thing, they didn't get overused over the weekend now, did they? They got to sleep in on Saturday and Sunday.
Well, and that could be an edge. Right now this team needs to be looking for any kind of edge they can. When you look at the, only 4 wins in the last 10 games for them, and
wow,
a young team kind of seemed to running into some trouble here late in the year. So yeah, an edge like that, it could be. It could be. I think Xavier might be a tough draw, but not certainly one that's not a game that they can't win. I think they can win, but they're going to have to play a little bit better than we saw up here in the Verizon Center.
All right, well, let's talk about the brackets and the seeding, because we do talk for 3 months about whether there'll be a 4 seed or a 5 seed or a 6 seed, where they'll draw, whether they'll go to Sacramento or Buffalo or some godforsaken place like Milwaukee. If I would have told you they're going to be a 6 seed, if I would have told you they're going to play Xavier and then get the winner of Florida State FGCU in Orlando, and they would do it on Thursday, and they'd be a little bit rested and relatively healthy, Tchaikovsky notwithstanding, and the other issues they had earlier in the year, but you would like this. This is a very desirable, it's a nice seed for them. Teams like Wisconsin got, wound up put behind them. They wind up avoiding all the 2s and the 1s. This weekend, Turgeon's got to be real happy with this. Now, what they do with it remains to be seen.
Right. And I'll be honest, I have not seen Xavier play except bits and pieces here and there. I do know they are exceptionally large on the perimeter, which translates to guys that can get out and cause some trouble when you're trying to shoot threes. But on the other hand, I can see Mello and Cowan maybe getting around these guys and getting in the paint and creating some things, which, hasn't been anything. Maryland hasn't got much going in the paint here of late, and I think that's going to be a key. I think in the NCAA tournament, more so Mike's basic theory of basketball, the team that gets the most easy baskets usually wins, and Maryland has got to find a way, whether it's in transition, creating some offense out of their defense, Mello going crazy with the ball in his hands, creating or scoring. They've got to find some ways to get more easy baskets and keep the offense flowing throughout the course of the game.
Well, this will be about Mello, right? And we've been saying that all year long. If he plays well this weekend, we'll be talking about going to San Jose next week. If he doesn't, even if he does play well, there's still a chance. Certainly Florida State's got some, has their own moxie, and we'll get to them in a minute. And believing that, well, at least we don't have to see Duke, right? But it's about Mello at this point, and I think on Friday night the game got big. They got sloppy. Certainly, the big gym did not help their ability to hit shots. That's for sure.
Well, that's true, but you felt like the home court advantage they really enjoyed, and I had several people who have been to a lot more tournaments than I have, a little bit older than me, and just have been on the beat for a long time, tell me they had never in any tournament seen a home court advantage like Maryland enjoyed, so lopsided. Normally there's a situation where, a road team picks up some of the other fans there, but boy, that place was heavily Terp, and credit to the fans there for that. But yeah, I can see Maryland playing better, and I think Mello is the key, but you can almost feel the pressure on him. But then again, isn't this what Mello always wanted? This is going to be his showcase to prove that he belongs at the next level, and there's a place for him. And you think about guards who have done that over the years, that have really upped the stakes, and played themselves, into a better spot in the NBA draft. And, here's Mello's chance. I thought the key the other night, I thought Northwestern was really familiar with what Maryland was doing. I thought they did a great job of making Maryland look for other options. And, with Tchaikovsky out of the mix right now, there aren't a whole lot of other options unless, Justin Jackson's going to have to get his game going again. And I thought Kevin Huerter he's playing so great here of late, but he got in a little bit of foul trouble, and I thought that hurt Maryland as well.
I'm still waiting for Dodd, right? And, Xavier brings in this big 6'9" kid, Gaston. They're going to take a look, trying to grab rebounds. As you've pointed out, they're not scoring points in the paint. They're not getting rebounds in the paint, either offensively, defensively. They're not getting putback baskets. They're not getting layups, to your point. That it's a penetrate and dump off, and then, it's a series of 20 and 30 footers. And when Herter's hitting them and when Melo's hitting them, they're doing okay. And they struggled with the threes the other night as well. That's something. Melo's going to have to hit threes this weekend.
Well, they look. Most teams look a lot better when the threes are dropping because that seems to open everything else up. Yeah, and Maryland's having a little trouble shooting the ball right now, kind of a crisis of confidence. But again, I think that comes from the fact that they aren't getting anything else easy right now, and that can change. I don't know what it's going to look like for Justin Jackson, but he's a guy that I think can be a force down low if he's got the right matchup. And we've also seen Herter hit the low block every now and then, and some plays like that can create. Cowan is a guy that I thought for a lot of that stretch where Maryland kind of lost its way here late. I didn't think he was playing particularly well. And he seems to have picked it up a little bit. And if he can create some things out there defensively, really, on the ball defense, that's one of the keys I thought earlier this year that made Maryland a lot better than people expected. Because I don't think people expected or foresaw that Cowan was going to be that much of an impact defensively. And there's a lot of hope here. And I think Maryland's had a little chance to reset, get their composure back, and hopefully it's a great situation. And then I really do think Florida State will be waiting on the next game. And, man, they are huge. They're almost like another Big Ten team. They're so big.
Yeah, tell me about Florida State a little bit because, obviously we're all asleep on the ACC around here, and I know you do just as much down there with Virginia, Virginia Tech, even into Richmond, and even small conferences. You watch a lot of Southern basketball, and the Florida State thing, people were talking about them as being national championship caliber a month ago. Now, as a 3 seed, look, I'm not going to complain about it. I've seen Duke, I've seen Kentucky, I've seen Kansas, I've seen Villanova. The longer you can stay away from those teams, the better for Maryland.
Oh yeah, no question. Florida State, to me, they are of the top teams that you looked at this season around the country. They are as deep about anybody. Leonard Hamilton can legitimately go 10, 11 deep in his rotation. So much though depends for them. I think if their guards. Raytham Mays and Bacon. Those guys have to be on, and they've been kind of streaky because they've definitely got the big bodies, and I'm impressed with the way they run the floor. Here's the thing about them, though. Their big edge in almost every big matchup they had this season was their depth. And, that gets neutralized during this time of the year because you have those extended television timeouts. So the game is broken into, each half is broken into like 4 quarters with the dead ball timeouts, at 16, 12, 8, and 4, and you get those long breaks. So the smart coaches can rest their guys coming in and out of those timeouts. Maybe you don't even need that, the extent of them. So a team that's not as deep can, you'll see, and in years past, Coach K at Duke, he goes down to a 6-7 man rotation this time of year, and a lot of other teams can get away with doing that. And so, I don't see Florida State going very far because I don't think that big edge for them will be as big an edge this time of year.
He is Mike Ashley. He's out at Blue Ribbon Sports, as well as with Terrapin Times, and covering all things Terps as the Turtles head to Orlando this weekend. Sort of a nice little thing for the fan base on the backside of Friday that if you've got to get a trip, at least it's not Buffalo or Milwaukee. As far as a 6 seed in this thing and where Wisconsin wound up, where the rest of the Big Ten, Minnesota's a 5 seed, I think we could all sort of scratch our heads, and we wind up doing that every year about the seeding process. I don't think they necessarily got Maryland wrong, but I feel like they got some other parts of the Big Ten wrong.
Well, Nestor, I thought it reaffirmed something you and I have been talking about most of the season. I really don't think the Big Ten was nearly as good as we expected it to be in the preseason. When you look the way Wisconsin dropped off down the stretch, I think Purdue sort of got rewarded for their body of work, but they weren't playing great down at the end. And, as great a story as Michigan is, to me, a team like that could finish, what were they, 8th or 9th in the league, and then could come out and win it the way they did, 4 games in 4 days. that spoke to me about the parity in the league this year. And I'm not saying parity like they're all great teams. I'm saying each team is kind of flawed. When you look at Maryland's youth, a lot of good players, but youthful, and some of the other teams. Yeah, Minnesota, when they're hitting threes, they look as good as anybody in the nation. But that's not something they've been able to rely on down the stretch either. There's realistically, do you see a Big Ten team in the Sweet 16?
Well, that would be the question, right? So through the weekend, only Purdue by seed would be expected as a 4 seed to survive till Sunday night or till Monday or till next weekend. It will be very interesting to see how Wisconsin fares if they get past Virginia Tech to have to look at Villanova. Ditto for Michigan looking at Louisville. And, Minnesota's going to have to look at Butler, this weekend if they can make it through Middle Tennessee State. And a lot of people think that that's a really tough 12 seed for them. That, Maryland did sort of get off by facing a team playing without its best guard, playing without its best player. He hasn't played in a month. They haven't adjusted to that. They didn't win in February. So if Maryland was going to get a dance partner here that you could really shoot some holes through, I think Xavier's that team. So, for me, Maryland, I feel like they're going to win on Thursday. I don't know how it's going to fare against Florida State.
Right. That's gonna be a tough matchup. But when you go back to the way Maryland was playing early in the season, they were able to match up and play well against those teams, and that was during a stretch when Tchaikovsky was hurt and not getting minutes either. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but we have to see a different Maryland team than we've seen the last couple of weeks. All with the exception of the Michigan State game, which was great. And there's another team we probably should talk about.
Sure.
Traditionally this time of year, everybody's penciling them in for a trip to the Final Four, but this isn't that Michigan State team this year. Although I do think they can get to their first round matchup. I don't know if they're going to get to the Sweet 16 either.
Nice seeds at the top, though, right? I mean, Villanova could be playing Duke in New York. You could have Kansas playing Louisville and Kansas City. Out in the West, you could have Gonzaga and Arizona meeting in San Jose. And then the North Carolina, Kentucky thing's kind of delicious in the South and Memphis as well. For the top teams, of those names, I'm expecting, 3 of them to be in the Final Four somewhere along the line. Maybe somebody sneaks in the back door, but I do think the 1 and 2 seeds are very, very formidable in this tournament.
Well, Carolina and Kentucky, and look out for UCLA in that. I'm calling that
Sure.
the group of death. I'm going a little soccer on you here when you think about the Blue Bloods in that league. And Carolina confounded me. I was kind of surprised they didn't beat Duke in the ACC, although I guess we should never say that about Duke. But there's just something about them this year. I don't know what it is. They don't seem to have, I don't know, I guess the key thing for them, though, was Barry getting in foul trouble against Duke, and that's when that run started there. So if they keep all their pieces on the floor, I think they may be the most talented team in the country. And I love the way they play. UCLA, too. Those teams get up and down the floor, and I love to see that this time of year. But the NCAA tournament, again, that format of all those breaks and just the way it becomes more of half-court game postseason doesn't always reward teams like that. So we'll see. I agree with you. I think Gonzaga and Arizona, that's going to come down to them. I'm right now, my first run-through on my bracket, I can't decide between Duke and Villanova. Villanova is the best team I've seen this year. But then Duke is on the one of yeah. And they're running Duke is Duke this time of year. Although I think defensively they're not as good as they've been in the past, and maybe that's going to be what ultimately separates that and maybe gets Villanova. And then Villanova brings all that experience. So see who shows up. This year of parity, maybe it's going to be a year when more of the higher seeds do. I heard a stat today, though, that traditionally only 41% of the top seeds ever get to have gotten to the Final Four. So it's really strange. You never know what's going to happen in a year like this. I somehow, the way to pick, though, is by the time you get to the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, you better have a lot of chalk there on your bracket.
Well, the one thing we know once we get the pizza and the wings and the beer out right around lunchtime on Thursday, and we see it right away because some team that's a lower seed gets into trouble kind of early and stays in trouble. We know most of these buildings are roughshod at best with a couple of thousand fans here, there. There are all these cavernous buildings at a lot of the smaller schools, and I talked about Jackson struggling to shoot in a big building. Well, Maryland's going to be playing in a big NBA gym down there in Orlando that's kind of strange to begin with. But none of the past matters. Whatever you did in the Big Ten, whatever you did in the Big East, whatever you did in the ACC, none of that matters. It's just literally who's in front of you. And for all of the hand-wringing and the angst and the losing in February and the bad streak and the injuries, I still look at it with Maryland and say, what's the end result? I mean, even being as awful as they were on Friday night in the big crowd, it didn't cost them. Losing that game in the way they did to Northwestern, it hurt the fans' feelings. Clearly, it bothered Turgeon, but it didn't bother them on Sunday. It didn't hurt their seed. It didn't throw them into some bad place where they have to go and see a 2 seed like Kentucky or Duke on Saturday or Sunday. I feel like they got a lot of years you get pissed about what happens with them and where they're seated and where they're going and, they're out to get me and all that stuff. Not this year. I think Maryland got an A+ pass through this thing. Now, what they're going to do with it, we'll see.
Yeah, not that there's a comparison between the level of the teams, but it reminds me a lot of the national championship year. If you remember, the Terps got bumped out early in the ACC tournament. It ended up being the best thing to ever happen to them because they got that rest, chance to refocus. The guys got a little pissed off and then went out there and made that run to a national championship. Now, I'm not saying this team's going to make a run to the national championship, but boy, they do have a chance to really to reset the game and make a legitimate run. And I think this is going to say a lot about where this team is. And again, the 20-2 start, I think, has skewed expectations, and I think Maryland fans are starting to realize that a little bit now. This is a team that starts three freshmen and does have some holes in the rotation, particularly with the way the injuries have come this season at different times, knocking different key guys out of the 8-man rotation. So, but again, they've got that chance to now to get that straightened out heading down south, and boy, that'd be a nice trip to take, if you're a Maryland fan.
He is Mike Ashley. He's out at Blue Ribbon as well as Terrapin Times, covering all things Turtles. And, last thing for you, because you've been around this a long time and you've worked on the inside of college athletics and as a media member, that Maryland thing on Friday really was special. I know you brought that out in the beginning about, the biggest crowd in tournament history and this and that. It really was unusual and weird, and I don't know that that'll ever be replicated, bro. I mean, it might be 8 to 10 years before they ever get a tournament game, and every year it feels like, to your point, these tournament games don't mean that much other than the emotion of it and gathering the teams together in some sort of pageantry way, unless a Michigan goes on a run and gets themselves into the tournament as they did over the weekend. But for the other teams that are already automatic, and I know we talked about this last week, it's not that big a deal, but it sure felt like a big deal to the fans on Friday night. The alcohol was flowing. They got down there early. It was packed. It was as good as it gets from a vibe standpoint. And I think 10 years from now, you and I would be talking and say, man, remember that night the Big Ten tournament was in D.C. and the entire Maryland fan base showed up and then they stunk it up? That'll be a memorable night there on Friday night. And not in a good way in that way, but in a good way for bringing Maryland fans together, because I didn't think that was possible on a Friday night for a meaningless game,
Well, it's a shame to get to see it, in the semifinals, because that could have really been something, because even more Maryland fans would have turned out. But I almost look at this like a bowl game. You talk about how teams travel well. Well, I think this is going to stick out to the Big Ten people that hey, DC is a great place to have the tournament after all, and fans coming from all over. Well, where else could you have it where you have as many things for fans that maybe don't get to this part of the country that often to see and do?
Mike, I was down there Sunday. My wife's donor, Niels, was here from Germany, and he brought his friend who had never been to D.C. So Sunday was my day to hang out in D.C. It was cold as hell. We got down there early. I knew for months I'd be hanging out in D.C. And obviously I'm thinking, well, if Maryland's in the tournament, I'm going to slide over to the game and, they can go run around the Smithsonian or whatever. Obviously Maryland wasn't in the game. It was cold as hell. We got down there, parked the car. We drove around the mall and around the Washington Monument, all the memorials, probably 5 times I circled. There was a St. Patrick's Day parade going on. I saw so much Big Ten swag on Sunday. I saw every color of the rainbow. I saw Ohio State fans. I saw Indiana fans. I saw Purdue fans. Maybe some of them were going to the game at 3 o'clock and were just milling, but there was a flavor in D.C. if you drove around on Sunday, long after Indiana and a bunch of these teams had been eliminated, where fans did come in and just sort of made a weekend of it. And if we keep playing basketball, we'll go to the games. If we don't, Yeah, what the hell? We'll go to the Hard Rock Cafe, or we'll go to the White House, or do something like that, or cherry blossoms were at least starting to come out. There is a great case for Maryland to say this should be part of some kind of a rotation every 6 years. I mean, it was a great place for the tournament, I thought.
Yeah, no doubt. And I've really been impressed with Big Ten fans, the way they, when I get to the football game so early, and you get to see the big Winnebagos out there with the school colors, and the people walking around, generally just sucking up the atmosphere of a place like Maryland where they had never been before, and you hope that continues, because truth be told, at the end of the ACC days, when Wake Forest showed up, or the Blue Devils for football, or somebody like that, there really was no buzz in the air around, the football stadium. And now that's changed with the Big Ten, and that's been great. And it's good to see. Obviously, basketball has always been the bell cow at Maryland, and although the team didn't put their best foot forward, I think the fans had a chance to.
It was a good time on Friday night, right on up until the second half started. Mike Ashley joining us here at Terrapin Times and Blue Ribbon. We hope it's going to be a good time at 6:50 on Thursday night. The Terps and the Xavier Musketeers meeting in Orlando. And, of course, a winner would stick them on a Saturday afternoon track to play Florida State probably. And we'll see how that goes. Mike, it's great having you on, man. I appreciate the insight, especially the ACC stuff on the Florida State side. We'll be thinking all things Terps this weekend, and hopefully you and I will be knowing the way to San Jose this time next week, right?
All right, don't eat all the good wings. Let's get going.
Hey, I got the snowstorm coming in. We got Chinese wings, pizza, and various refreshments around here. It's a wonderful time to be alive, Mike Ashley.
Excellent.
Be well. Enjoy the games. We'll see you this week.
Thanks.
You got it. Mike Ashley, nobody covers the game better than him, out at Blue Ribbon, as well as at TerrapinTimes.com. Good man, great guest for us, and a wealth of Maryland historical information. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download that TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear, right in the palm of your hands, mobilely, as well as on your iPad, anywhere else that you go. We were listening in Auckland, New Zealand 2 weeks ago, so we are bad international. I was going to say bad nationwide, but nasty and nationwide. That was an old thing. We're over that now. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. We stream live on our Facebook Live all the time, and, of course, our YouTube WNSTV channel. Wind, snow, rain, we're like the post office. We're going to be there for you either way, especially at AM 1570. Last but never least, the morning newspaper does ship to your email inbox at 7 a.m. That is all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It's $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. I know. A little snowy, a little crazy, a little cold right now, but bikini season, the beach is coming. Trust me, I've read up on global warming. Last but never least is breaking news. I should point this out. The WNST Tech Service all weekend long with all sorts of Raven stuff. Orioles coming north soon, as well as the Terps and what's going on with them over the weekend. You get it all first in the WNST Tech Service. That's brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5, getting you ready for the Terps, getting you ready for March Madness, and plenty of sports on our docket. Wizards, Caps, golf is getting started now. They're running cars around tracks every weekend. Before you know it, the Preakness will be here. We got stakes races coming up. It's a good time to be alive. Shovel out. Move on. It will warm up. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.